We had a question last week about receptive language. It was teaching receptive language and discrimination. And it's a tough question, and it's one of those things that I joke around, but teaching discrimination keeps me up at night sometimes. You've got some kiddos who are really fast learners. You throw out 3 things and you say touch the ball, and within 10 trials the kid's touching the ball. And then you say touch the sock, within 10 trials kids touching the sock, and then they can discriminate between sock and ball, and it's awesome and it goes well. And 10 teaching days later, they've got discrimination, they've got 10 labels, they're on their way to learning 20, it's fabulous. And then you get these kiddos who can't discriminate to save their lives. Like they just, you teach block or you teach ball and you do 100 trials of just ball, and then they get it. And then you introduce sock, bear with me here, but sock, and what are they doing? They're teaching, touching ball. I get that. So then you do 1,000 trials and you teach sock, and they finally get sock. And then you go back to ball, and they don't have ball. And it's like, what do you do, right? I don't know if anybody else has been in that situation. I have a few times. I would say probably in all the kiddos I've worked with, maybe 10, 11 kids have had that. Sure, I think you've worked with a few like that as well.
And I currently have almost a whole bunch. Yeah, PECS is a nightmare for those kids.
So, some questions. So the question that specifically came up was like, I'm teaching body parts and the kid can't maintain body parts. The kid seems to be able to do it when it's functional. So if you say, put shoes on your feet, touch your feet, they're able to do that. Or, you put mittens on your hands, clap your hands, they're able to do that. But there's limited amount of body parts you can do with that. I was like, that's an awesome suggestion, make things as functional as possible. Amazing. The other question I had was, is body parts even appropriate at this point in time? So the information that I don't have is, I'm not sure how many receptive labels or receptive commands that this kiddo currently follows. So my typical rule is, trying to gain a repertoire of 100, 200 labels before teaching body parts, because, there are so many more functional labels than body parts when you first start out with a kiddo. So, if a child is motivated for juice, or if they're motivated for shoes because they're going to the park, or they're motivated, I don't know, for cookie or whatever, teach all of those labels first before getting into head and shoulders, knees and toes. If the child does have 200 or so labels and they're just not discriminating body parts, it might be a motivation thing. It might be a natural environment teaching thing, or they might have just had it up to their ears with body parts. Like, don't you dare tell me to touch my nose again. I know where my nose is and I just don't want to do it. So there could be a lot of things, but let's go with the fact that they don't have receptive or enough receptive labels at this point in time. There's a lot of research, especially in the VB research, to say that requesting leads to tacting. But tacting and receptive identification doesn't lead to manding. So what does that mean? It means that if you can teach a kiddo to ask for cookie, and to ask for juice, and to ask for his shoes, and ask for this and ask for that, once they've got a repertoire of, say, 10, 20 items, they should be able to turn those around and just do receptive identification without much teaching. So you may need to just go in and teach a whole bunch of manding of different nouns before you teach receptive ID. If you've tried that and it's still not working, that's when you go with banging your head against the wall. I'm kidding, but I would go with the man training first. The second thing I would do is I would start with labels. So you're looking at, receptive ID. I would start with things that don't sound the same. So for instance, juice and shoes sound the same. That ooh sound sounds too similar. So I might choose shoes, but then I might choose water because they're different and the kid's motivated by both. I'm also going to try and choose things from across categories because if it's within the same category or it serves a similar function, kiddos can't seem to do it. So socks versus shoes, you wear them both on your feet. They're both clothing. For some reason, kids can't always identify or get socks versus shoes. I've also been in a situation, this is banana. Sound totally different, but for some reason, a kiddo kept mixing up apple versus banana, both fruit. Something happened there. There was some kind of something in her brain. So pick things across categories, pick things that don't sound the same, and pick things that have different functions. So, and things that are motivating, or at least things that are functional in their life. So, I might teach cow if a kid lives on a farm. I'm not teaching cow to a city kid as one of my first labels. Right. So, okay. So I pick 3 things. I'm picking, you know, ball because it's motivating, it's a toy. I want to pick boots because it's wintertime, but ball, boots sound, you know, I'm going to pick shoes instead. So ball, shoes, and water sound very different, different categories, different functions. Great. That's where I'm going to start. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just teach the give me response. So just having, you know, having an item, one item out, and I'm just going to hold up my hand and say, you know, give me, give me, give me. That's it. Or I might just say shoes, even better. Shoes, shoes. Right? Water, and it's just one out. And then I would put two out, but not two of the same items. It would be like one plus a distractor that's something different, or even just blank pictures or something like that. I might even start out with objects and do it that way. I'm going to go into a lot more detail about this in our webinar coming up as well. So if you guys have, you know, a learner who's really struggling with discrimination, that's the way I've done it, or I'll break it down further there. A lot of you guys have done that discrimination, you know, 2 out, 3 out distractors, and then you start randomly rotating. But even still, as soon as you get into that random rotation phase, these kiddos who have really tough time discriminating, you're like, ah, it's not working again. So then what do you do? So, you know, in terms of getting creative, a few different things that I've done with one kiddo in particular. This was only a couple months ago. We did this, and it was a suggestion another therapist had, and it worked. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. We put out 3 identical matching instruments. So 6 instruments, like 2 drums, 2 maracas, and 2 bells, or whatever it was. And we had them, they weren't functional in his life whatsoever, but they made noises, and they made different noises. So, you know, we held up, or we banged the drum and we said drum, and all he had to do was a gross motor imitation, which the student could do. So he imitated the drum as we said drum, and we banged the drum. Once he was able to do that, you know, we said bell, he rang the bell, whatever. Once he was able to do that, then what we did is we just took those 3 items and we put them out, and we put the other 3 behind her back. And then what we would do is we would say bell, we would ring the bell behind her back, and the student would have to match the sound. So it was an imitation / match to sound type thing. And the student was able to do that, surprisingly. He was able to match to the sound. Then what we did is we faded out the sound so that we just said bell, and then he was able to pick up the bell. And he did all that. That was amazing. So that was the very first discrimination he had, was that he was able to discriminate between bell and maraca and drum. And then after that, it was almost like he was like, oh, you want me to cue into your voice? That's what you want. And the rest of the labels came. Another kiddo, we actually had to pair in gestures. So, you know, we taught ball, we taught the gesture with ball, and then we taught her to do the gesture when we said ball, and then she picked up the ball. And that seemed to work for her. Shira, do you have any techniques that you've used?
So back to like body parts, because that was the original question. I find it for some kids very challenging because body parts, like on themselves, some kids just don't have that like proprioceptive idea of like where their body really is in space. So like they may know that an arm is an arm, but like then they have to find it on themselves, and like that's very different, especially if you start with like head, like you can't see your own head. So you could do something like, if they enjoy like squeezes, then back to what you were saying, but have them request for it first. If they like some sort of sensory activity with their body parts, they could tell you where they want you to like do that. So it's like, tickle me on my arm, tickle my head, tickle this. And that could be a good first step to get that like feedback as to what parts of their body it is. Yeah, in terms of general discrimination, I find that like the kids that really struggle, we try to create a lot of like routines. So if they have a really hard time with like, you know, go get your lunch and go get your shoes and whatever that is, then we might just like keep those routines very similar and just keep pairing those 2 together, and just make it like functional for them. Because if they can never do that in isolation, if it's just, there's no context and you just say, go get your shoes, I don't know that all kids can do that. So just creating like realistic routines so that they can get the feel of what the language is and the meaningfulness of it, and just making it functional. And then what we do also in terms of discrimination for something like PECs or like picture exchange, I guess it's not technically PECs the way we do it, is that we don't expect them. We have some kids who really struggle with discrimination with like preferred items, that the expectation with PECs is that you have to rotate the items so that they'll request. And especially if they're on the front cover, they ask for it. If they make a mistake, especially, you move all the items around and then they have to discriminate again. So discrimination is a huge expectation. And the kids that really can't do it, we just don't expect it. And we have the pictures stay in the same place. And that way they're learning more like the motor planning aspect of it versus like having us move the pictures around constantly. And that seems to work. So for kids that really can't get past, the level 3 discrimination, we just keep the pictures in the same place, and that way they're learning more through their motor planning versus through their visual discrimination.
Sure. A little note on that. So I was working with a speech pathologist once who a kiddo couldn't get past the discrimination of, in the PECs, you'd switch the icons around. And she said, Shayna, do you ever pick up your husband's phone and go, where's Safari? Well, where is that text message piece, right? Because his icons, or whoever's icons are on the phone you're picking up, aren't in the same spot yours are, right? We have those automatic responses too. And I think if someone were to play with my phone and mess my icons up, I'd be so frustrated. That's always stuck with me whenever I do PECs, is I now skip that step, because for most of us, especially, with technology these days, all our apps, all of our icons and stuff are in the same spot. So why are we going to mess our kiddos up?
Yeah, I agree with that.